Well, we started at the beginning of the year a series of messages where we're talking about discipleship and what does discipleship look like, and we decided we would put these series of messages around the goals of a disciple. Each disciple has three particular goals, and the first goal is to be with Jesus, to be with the Master, to be with the Rabbi. But the second goal is to become like the Master, to become like the Rabbi. And the third goal is to do what Jesus was doing. And so we want to be with Jesus, we want to become like Jesus, and we want to do what Jesus is doing. And so just as Jesus called people to follow him and to be his disciples in the first century, Jesus today is still calling people. He's calling all of us to come behind him, to come with him and follow him and be his disciples, even today. And so this is something that applies to all of us, not just the children, not just the teenagers, not just the seniors. It applies to all of us, that Jesus is calling us to come and to follow him, to follow the way of the Rabbi. And so the way is the way that he would live, the way that he would live out his life, and it produced the life that we see, that we read about in the Scriptures, what we read about in the Gospels. It's a result of the lifestyle that Jesus would live. Now, a lot of us, we want the end result, right? You know, I want to lose weight, and I want that six-pack ab, and I've got a 12-pack ab because 12 of mine are covering the other 6. And it's got this layer of, and it doesn't show up as much. I want the end result, but I don't want to do what it takes to get there. And that's the way it is with following Jesus. We want to be like Jesus. We want to be able to do the things that Jesus did, but we don't always want to do what it takes to accomplish that end result. And so in this first passage we looked at in Luke, that we had read with us here today, Luke, just make a couple of observations. Can the blind lead the blind? I was thinking in our small group last Sunday night, I think Nancy brought that up, and I thought, how appropriate Nancy would bring that up. Now, I pick on Nancy for being legally blind, but I'm also legally blind in my right eye as well. So can Nancy lead me, who's legally blind, the blind leading the blind? We'd be in trouble, wouldn't we? And the obvious answer is no, the blind can't lead the blind. And then the question is, will they both fall into the pit? And the answer is, of course, yes, they will. And Jesus is poking at the Pharisees and the Sadducees and the religious leaders. He's poking at them because he's calling them blind leaders. Here they know the Scriptures. They've got a lot of it committed to memory. And they're standing right before Jesus himself, and they don't recognize Jesus. And so Jesus is saying they're blind leaders. They're blind guides, and they're not leading you where you need to go. And so we've got to be careful that, if we're listening to a preacher, if we're hearing, our favorite preacher on the radio, or we're reading a particular book that we like, we've got to be careful that we're not led by blind leaders. And so we're always checking what we hear with what the Scriptures say, because these two have got to be in line with each other. Else we've got blind leaders leading the blind, and that's not going to end well. And so the other part of this verse, of this short little parable, just a short little 2-verse parable, the second part is everyone who's fully trained will be like the teacher. I think that's really important. Everyone who is fully trained will be like the teacher. Because I think here we see what the goal of following Jesus is all about. We want to be like Jesus. This is the ultimate goal for which we follow Jesus. And sometimes we forget the goal. Sometimes we think that the goal is to go to heaven when I die. Now, certainly, if I have a choice of going to heaven when I die or going to hell when I die, I want to go to heaven, for sure. That's the choice I want to make. But as we read through the Gospels, as we're encouraging you to do so, reading through the Gospels over and over again, you'll see that the primary objective is not to go to heaven when I die, but it's to become like Jesus today. And that's really different than what we sometimes get consumed with. We get consumed with I just punched my ticket and I'm on my way to heaven and that's all I got to worry about, instead of becoming like Jesus. And I think as we read through the New Testament, we see this emphasis, and Jesus gives it, and Paul gives it, and Peter gives it, this emphasis on being like Jesus, being transformed to become like Jesus. Now, I think in this verse we see those who are fully trained will be like Jesus. So there's some stages along the way, right? You can be partially trained and not be as much like Jesus as we need to be. Or we can be fully trained and be like Jesus. So the goal is to be completely changed and transformed to be like Jesus. 2 Corinthians 3:18, Paul says it this way, all of us with unveiled faces, seeing the glory of the Lord as though reflected in a mirror, are being transformed into the same image from one degree of glory to another. For this comes from the Lord, the Spirit. The word transformed, they asked me in Sunday school class if I remembered what I preached on last week. And then, not only did they ask what I preached on, because I could remember that, then they asked me, do you remember that Greek word? And I had to pause there for a minute because all I could think of was the Greek word I'm going to share with you in just a moment. But eremos was the Greek word that I talked about last week of silence and solitude, going into the eremos, going into the quiet place. But the Greek word I'm using today is metamorpho. And some of us, I think, know what that word means. We have it. We use it in our English. It means to change physical form, structure, substance, especially, Webster says, especially by supernatural means. And I think that's kind of important. This transformation is radical. This change is profound. You know, the caterpillar that transforms into a butterfly, this is not just a little dabble-do-ya. This is a radical change from crawling around as the caterpillar to flying around as the beautiful butterfly. And so my first question is, can we actually become like Jesus? Is it even possible for us to be transformed and to be changed and to become like Jesus? And we're all here in church and we're listening to the preacher and we think, well, I don't know where he's going, so I don't know if I need to answer yes or we should answer no. I'm not really sure. But what would you think? Yes. It's possible, right? Jesus talks about it. He teaches this. We see it in Paul's letters to these churches, these early believers. We see it all the way through the letters to Hebrews, to James. We see this transformation is something that we are to be about. So I think it's definitely possible. It's definitely possible. But the next question then becomes, well, how? How does that happen? A lot of us get stuck, though, on the possibility of whether or not this could happen. We get stuck as individuals, and then we get stuck even as a church. And I've heard this, and maybe you've heard this too, in conversation with people. Well, you need to be like Jesus, and the way you're living right now is not very much like Jesus. And then the response that I get is the shoulder shrug, and they're like, well, nobody's perfect, right? We're only human. Have you heard that before? Maybe you've used that before. Use that excuse. Well, nobody's perfect. Come on. Lighten up, preacher. What do you expect from me anyway? So I think as individuals, many of us get stuck right here because we don't see this as a real possibility in our life, and it's not something that we pursue very seriously. Because we don't see this as an attainable goal, we don't really try too terribly difficult. We just kind of, I got my ticket punched to heaven, that's all that matters. I believe the right things about God, so I'm good to go. And we've got churches that teach that it's really impossible for this transformation to take place until death. And we get into all kinds of doctrines about that, but one of the doctrinal distinctives of our church, Hernando Church of Nazarene, is that we believe that the Bible teaches that this transformation is possible, and in fact, it should be pursued. I just get a smattering of amens there, so I'll try that one more time, see if we can get a little more. One of our doctrinal distinctives as a church, as the Church of the Nazarene, is that we believe that this transformation is possible and is something that we should pursue. Now, there we go. A disciple or a student or apprentice has as its goal to be like the teacher, to be like the rabbi, to be like the master. And when we see Jesus, we see that he is loving and kind and merciful, and we know that we need to seek to be loving and kind and merciful just like Jesus is. And we see Jesus is patient, and we see he is holy, and we see he is joyful and generous, and we recognize that we also need to seek to have those characteristics about us as well. That we are transformed from the inside out, that we are holy and joyful and generous and patient. So, is it possible? We say yes, and so then how? I don't know. How's this change supposed to take place? Well, my experience as a pastor has been about 30 years, and I was raised in a Christian home, and I was taught that this transformation was possible. But one of the things that I struggled with as a young person growing up is, how does this take place? And I remember I'd have a preacher that would say, now I'm going to tell you, explain to you sanctification, this process of transformation. I'm going to explain this to you. I'm going to help you to understand. And I remember I would take notes and I would try to figure it out because I wanted to learn. I wanted to be like Jesus. And I knew that there are a lot of times I really wasn't very much like Jesus. I was doing pretty good on Sunday morning when I was sitting there in my Sunday go-to-meeting clothes. But then when I would go to school and somebody would start harassing me or causing trouble, and all of a sudden it wasn't as easy to be like Jesus as it was there on Sunday morning sitting in the pew. And I would scratch my head and wonder, now, what happened? And so I would come down, to the front where these places are that you can come and pray. We call them the altars, where we'd come down and pray and meet with God. And I would pray and say, God, you do it to me. I don't know what you need to do, but you need to do something because it's not working when I go to school. And when I have interactions with other people, and I struggled with this. How does this transformation take place? And it wasn't because of a lack of desire on my part, because I wanted it. I wanted to be like Jesus. I wanted to be changed. I didn't want that anger that would instantly well up within me when I would get irritated. I didn't want that. I desired to be like Jesus. And so when I went to college, I liked to read, and I was reading all the books that I could read. And I remember as a young associate pastor, I was serving in a church, and we had an evangelist who lived in our community. And I went one Sunday afternoon over to that evangelist's house because he had written a couple books on the subject. And so I sat down there and I talked with him, and I asked all kinds of questions. And I left, and I was sort of on a frustration. I read his books, I heard his conversation, but everything that he said to do, I was already doing, and it wasn't working. It didn't seem. A disciple or a student or an apprentice has a goal to be like the teacher, like the rabbi, like the master. And I struggled with how to put this into practice. And I think it's important for us to recognize that all of us are disciples. Every one of us here is a disciple. We're being shaped and formed spiritually either by Jesus and God and the Holy Spirit, or by the world and the influences that the world has upon us. And so one of the things that I think we find is that we need to come to terms with that reality, that we are becoming someone because of the influence that's around us in the world that just happens naturally. I don't have to try to be like the world because I've got these influences that are pressing in all around me. And so what I have to do is be intentional to say, no, I'm not going to allow them to influence me and shape me and mold me, that I'm going to accept the countercultural message of Jesus, and I'm going to accept his countercultural way of being a disciple of Jesus. And so when I do that, my life's going to be different. So briefly, let me just rattle off, I think, 4 key ways that the world is forming us and shaping us. And the first way that it molds us and shapes us is with the story that it teaches, and the story that we believe has an impact on shaping us and making us like the world. And secondly, the habits that we that we have in our life, and thirdly, the relationships that we have, and fourthly, the environment that we call home. First of all, the story that we believe. All of us believe a story about the world, about life. Whether we understand it or we can articulate it, we all believe this story. Sometimes we call this the worldview. And so this story that's being told by the world around us is not the same as the story that we read in the Scriptures. And so let's take, for example, evolution. The world tells a story about how this world evolved and how it was sort of a cosmic accident. And what we have today is sort of a random event that took place, and it just happened. It just is. But that's a very different story than the story that we read from Scripture, which tells us that we have a loving Creator God who purposely created us and placed us where we are today. And all this that we have around us, God created. And when He originally created it, it was good. It was good. It was good. And so you can see that if you believe the story that the world is telling you, that we are nothing more than really just animals down further from the evolutionary chain as humans, if we believe that story, then there's a number of other ramifications as well. That we believe that monogamy is nothing more than a social construct, that marriage is nothing more than a cultural construct. And so the story, the worldview that we hold to, that we believe, molds us and shapes us and affects the way that we live. Secondly, the habits that we employ also greatly affect how we live. You could probably say that we are byproducts of our habits. And there's been a lot written about habits, even in the secular world today. But I remember when I was in college, after my freshman year, I was going to spend the summer in England. And so I hopped on in Los Angeles. I had some training in San Diego, and I flew from L.A. to London. It was like a 14-hour flight. That was a long flight in the air. But I remember flying on that plane, and I got to experience for the first time some authentic British tea. And back in the day, I mean, this was a long time ago, 1988 or something like that. Long time ago, I remember, at this point in time, the only tea that I had really ever experienced was this, instant tea, that you maybe heard of Nestea before. And if you're old enough, you remember some of those commercials from the 70s and maybe even in the 80s, they would take the Nestea plunge and they would fall back into the water. Well, that's the only kind of tea that I was really acquainted with and familiar with. But on this British Airways flight going to England, where I was going to spend the summer, they had, these carts that were coming down and all the clanking and the rattling of these actual teacups and saucers that were being served to us. So we had hot tea being served to us. And they asked me if I wanted cream in my tea. And I thought, what? Why would you put cream or milk in your tea? I'd never heard of such before. I put sugar and lots of sugar and ice cubes, but I've never put cream in my tea before. And I thought, well, I'm going to spend all summer in England. I might as well give it a try and see what it tastes like. And I thought, wow, this isn't too bad, actually. But the tea tastes a lot different than the tea that we would make and put in the pitchers and in our refrigerators at home. This was a really bold and strong flavored tea, that black Earl Grey tea that they would serve. And all summer long, in the morning, we'd have a tea time with our English tea and a spot of cream and a biscuit. And I got to enjoy that a little bit. And I look forward to that in the morning and the afternoon. And if I was really fortunate, maybe even before we would head off to bed in the evening, drinking tea. And I got used to that caffeine intake. And I enjoyed that caffeine intake. And then when I came back to America and I went back to college, I realized I'm lacking something. And I didn't want to go, get a brewery going for my hot tea, so I decided I would convert and start drinking Mountain Dew and get my caffeine intake through Mountain Dew. So these habits of waking up in the morning, and every morning I usually have myself a cup of hot tea, put some cream in it, and a couple of spoonfuls of honey. Oh, that's good stuff. But these habits begin to shape me, and I know when I miss my caffeine, in the afternoon, my head starts hurting, and I think, oh, what's going on here? Because these habits that I have developed have an impact on my life. And so certainly even the small habits that we have in life make a big difference. One of the New York Times bestsellers recently, Atomic Habits, talks about how these small habits make a huge difference in the way that we live. And I think the world even recognizes that. So the stories we believe, the habits that we practice, and our relationships, certainly the people that we know, that we spend time with, we become like the people that we spend time with. Show me your friends, the saying goes, and I will show you your future. Show me your friends, and I will show you your future. Paul said it this way in 1 Corinthians 15:33, do not be misled. Bad company corrupts good character. And I think Paul's actually quoting from a Greek poet when he uses that line. It's something that's pretty common. The world knows that our relationships have an impact on how we live. And finally, our environment, or the place that we call home, our family, they have a big influence on us as well. For good or for bad. Good habits shape us for good, bad habits shape us for bad. So all of our life, we're being shaped, we're being molded, we're being influenced, and we don't even have to try. But if we want to be countercultural, if we want to practice and follow the way of Jesus, we've got to go against the stream of the world. We've got to have new story. We've got to have new habits. We got to have new friends and new relationships. We've got to have a new family if we want to live and follow the way of Jesus. And so I'm still getting to the point of answering, how do we do this? I want to dispel a couple of myths that are common. And the first myth is, well, all you need to do is know the Bible. All you need to do is know the Bible. Learn the Bible, memorize Scripture, and you'll be changed. You'll be transformed. Now, I believe in studying and knowing the Scriptures, so don't misunderstand me. The Bible is really vital to our formation and following the way of Jesus. Jesus knew the Bible really well. He knew it really well. And when he was tempted, he could cite scriptures, couldn't he? And it would be important for us, if we're going to follow the way of Jesus, that we learn the Bible as well. But we are not transformed and changed simply by our knowledge of the Bible. So if our knowledge of the Bible could change us, then we would just read the Bible and boom, we'd be changed, right? But that's not really how it happens. You know, if I've got a problem with anxiety that I'm dealing with, I'm struggling with in my life, so I read a book that says, don't worry. Oh, okay, I'll be changed. I'll not worry anymore. Life is peace now. That's not how it works, is it? If I want to lose weight, I can read a book on how to diet and exercise. And I read the book and, oh, yeah, instantly. My knowledge doesn't bring about change in my life, in my lifestyle, in the way that I live. So it's important for us to recognize that the knowledge is good, but it's not sufficient in and of itself. And so knowing something is not the same thing as doing it. And doing it is not the same thing as wanting to do it. And so we have a deeper problem than just a lack of knowledge and understanding. We can't think our way to Christ's likeness. Our mind is essential, but we need to adopt the lifestyle of Jesus if we want to live the life of Jesus. And too often our approach to discipleship has been solely intellectual. It becomes an information transfer. And, so like the Matrix, just download me, how to be patient. Oh, now I'm patient. I'm not impatient any longer. That's not how it works. The second myth is you don't need to do anything. Just let go and let God, right? You probably heard that, right? That's really, really bad theology. We've heard it before, but that's not good theology. And so I would go to the altar and I would pray, God, do it. Change me, fix me, help me. And God's certainly willing. God wants me to be changed. God wants me to be like Jesus. But all the times that I would come down and say, here I am, fix me, change me, it wouldn't happen. You see, without him, we can do nothing, right? Without him, we can't change. But without us, he won't change us. You see, this is a cooperation that we have, a partnership that we are involved in with God. So transformation becomes a joint effort between us and God. God has a responsibility and we have a responsibility. One of my theology textbooks when I was in school was Grace, Faith, and Holiness. Now, I'm not a big fan of that book, actually. It's dense and kind of a challenge to read, but I do love the title. Grace, God's grace that comes to us. God comes to us first. God enables us, empowers us, and so that we can respond with faith. So God, grace, our faith, and it leads to holiness. It leads to Christ-likeness. It leads to transformation. And so I think we need to recognize that our part is to seek and do what God has called us to do. And I think it's important for us to look at Jesus and his life. So what we need is both the form and the power if we're going to be changed. We need the form, we need God's truth, we need God's word, we need God's instruction. But we also need the power, we need the Holy Spirit. We need God to come and do what we can't do ourselves. So no Holy Spirit, no power equals no transformation and no holiness. And the best that we can do is legalism. And believe me, I've seen legalism. It ain't pretty. And it ain't Jesus. But if we go the other direction, if we just go, give me Jesus, just give me the Holy Spirit, let me have it in power, let me have an encounter with God, let me have a supernatural move of God and experience it without any form, then we go from up to down to up to down to up to down based on our experiences. And the analogy that I like to use is that of a cement truck. Never thought the preacher would use a cement truck, right? But I'm trying to figure out how to convey this. And so cement truck's got this cement in the back and it's spinning around. And you say you want to drive. I want a driveway poured out here in my yard. So if the cement truck comes and they just dump that cement out and it spreads out and it's going to be nice and thin and you'll drive across it after it dries and it'll crack and break all up. Because it doesn't have the forms. But if you put the forms there, and then you pour the cement in, and you got the rebar, and you got the wire mesh, and everything together, then that hardens and becomes solid, and you can drive on that driveway. And there's a lot of Christians, a lot of churches in the world that we're looking for the power. We want the cement, and it just spreads out, and it's real thin. And our walk with God is up and when we got a good experience, and down when we're bad, and up when it's going good, and down when we got a bad time going on. And then we got the other churches that are talking about the forms. Look at my beautiful forms. I got great forms. The forms are true. They're square. They're perfectly lined up. But there's no power. There's no spirit within them. We need both. We need the forms and the power. And so God has given us some of the forms through the life of Christ for us to follow, the example for us to follow. So we read this passage, Romans 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. But if we're not intentional, if we're not purposeful, the world's just going to form us. The world's going to mold us. The world's going to shape us. So we've got to be intentional so that we can be countercultural to how the world's trying to form us up. Because the way of Jesus is different than the way of the world. It's vastly different. So we've got to be intentional. If we're going to be formed by the story of God, we've got to dive into the Scriptures. We've got to allow the Scriptures to saturate our lives. And so that's why we're encouraging you to read through the Gospels. Spend 4 times this year reading through the Gospels, letting the life of Jesus and how he lived, let that shape you. Let the story of God inform you and shape you. And secondly, we need to employ new habits. We talked about silence and solitude last week, but we need prayer. We need corporate worship. We need fasting. These habits are not the end in of themselves, but they lead us to Jesus. These habits lead us to a place where we can know Christ, where we can know God. And they lead us to the transformation from the inside out. So if I were to ask somebody, say I tell Cheyenne, you got to come up here and play Mozart's Requiem in D minor. How well do you think she'll do? Unless she's a trained pianist, she's not going to do very well, right? Even if she is a trained pianist, that might be kind of hard just on the spot to pull it off. But if she's sitting there at the piano and I'm saying, come on, Sean, you can do it, try harder. Is that going to help her? It's not going to help her at all. What if I pray over, Cheyenne, may God help you. Do you think God will help her to start playing Mozart? Maybe. But a surefire method for her is not to try harder, but to train harder, right? And she might have to start out by playing her scale, da 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 da. And she might have to do all of this and work at it every day for a period of time, and then she comes to a point where she can play Mozart. And we think about that whether it be in sports or music. It's pretty easy for us to see how that works. But it also works that way in the spiritual life. If we want to be transformed and changed, we've got to be trained to live the life that Jesus lived. And we don't do that in our own strength. We need the Holy Spirit. But we also need to do our part, which is to avail ourselves to these means of grace, to avail ourselves to these habits, these holy habits that bring about transformation. The third thing is we need new relationships. And so that's why community is so crucial. Community is essential. You can't follow Jesus alone. I can't follow Jesus alone. We need the Christian community. We need the context of community to bring about the transformation in the life of Jesus. Jesus didn't call a disciple to follow him. He called disciples, plural, to follow him in community. And Jesus is calling us as disciples to follow him in the context of community. On Wednesday, we talked about some of the one another passages. I think there's like 59 one another commands in the New Testament. That we are to one another. Love one another, serve one another, forgive one another, on down the list it goes. Now you can't one another without one another's, right? We need each other if we're going to be obedient to the commands and directions that we've been given to one another. And we need this community. We need this community because community will reveal things in our heart and our life. And community will encourage us. On May the 12th, the day before I married Stephanie, I was a pretty good person, I thought. I thought I was a pretty good catch for her. She worked hard to catch me, and deservedly so. She was going to get a good catch for me, right? May 13th, we had our wedding. The 14th, I began to realize, in the context of our relationship, I began to realize just how selfish and self-centered I was. I didn't realize that until I got married. And she served like a mirror to me and reflected all of my selfishness and all my self-centeredness. It was coming out in vivid color. I could see it in 4K. It was clear as a bell. I didn't like it, believe me. And I fussed about it, and I tried to blame her for it. But the community is essential for accountability and for revealing what's in our own heart and life. It'd be easy for me to just keep on living the single life, and I would be fine, and I could just tell everybody how great and wonderful I am. But when I got into this marriage and this close relationship, then all of a sudden all my faults get magnified and shown right up in my face. And this is what happens in the church too. We come together, and sometimes we got to deal with people who are different than us, right? Extroverts got to deal with introverts. Republicans got to deal with Democrats. We got people from different perspectives that come together, and now all of a sudden we've got to deal with each other. And I don't understand how these West Virginians think. How could you cheer for the West Virginia Mountaineers when you've got a perfectly good team like Kansas Jayhawks to cheer for? It makes no sense to me. But when we come together and we begin to realize that they point out some things in my life, my heart, that really don't line up with Jesus very well. But community also is a source of encouragement. And so this is why small groups, life groups, are so important. They're so essential and vital. And this is why I want to encourage you to get connected and get plugged in, because community is essential to following Jesus and to being transformed and changed. So our community exposes our flaws, but it also encourages us to keep on going. So my question is, transformation really possible? The answer is yes. It's possible, but it's not inevitable. Just because I've been in the church for 30 years or been in the church for 50 years, that doesn't mean I'm going to be like Jesus. That just means I've hung around the church for a long time. But there's a distinction between being transformed and changed like Jesus and just hanging around the church. And we've got a lot of people that have hung around the church and call themselves Christians, but they haven't seen much transformation in their heart and their life. And we're shallow and thin and immature at best. But when we are fully trained, we become like Jesus. We want the life of Jesus. We've got to adopt his lifestyle. We've got to take on his lifestyle. So my question is, who are you becoming? In the next 5 years, the next 10 years, who are you becoming? Are you becoming more and more like Jesus? Are you becoming more and more like the world? Because it's going one way or the other. In 10 years, who do you want to be? Do you want Jesus' character more evident and more real in your heart and your life? Or have you just sort of, I punched my ticket to heaven and now I'm coasting along? There's no room for coasting in the community of Christ. And the thing of it is, you can be successful in the world's eyes. You can have a nice house, and you can have a nice job, drive a nice car, have a good solid retirement. You can have all of that, and by the world's eyes, you're successful, but you can be a failure as a disciple of Jesus at the same time. We can fail to be like Jesus if we're not intentional. And so as we wrap up this message here today, I just want to encourage you to be the disciples of Jesus who are following Jesus, who want to spend time with him, to become like him so that we can do the things that he did. That we want to adopt his lifestyle so that we can be like Jesus. And we can't do it by ourselves. Abide in him. We talked about abiding in him. Without Christ, we can do nothing. We need the power of the Holy Spirit in our lives. But we also need to form these habits, the community of Christ, these relationships to help form us to bring about the transformation from the inside out that we need. Jesus, I want to be like you. And here I am. I'm willing to do my part so that you can work in me and change me. Amen? Let's stand together. Father, we thank you for bringing us together here today. We thank you for each one that is part of the body of Christ that we call the Hernando Church of the Nazarene. We thank you for our young people that were here with us, worshiping together here today. It is a joy to be together with them, to see their faces, to see their enthusiasm. And I pray that we might help them, that we might show them the way and the way that we live. May they see Christ in us. May they see people who are transformed and radically changed because of what Jesus has done in and through us. God, I pray for our church, the Hernando Church Nazarene, that we would be effective in the mission that you've called us to go out and take the good news to a world that's hurting and lost. So may we point people to you through the way that we live, and the way that we love, and the way that we serve. Father, I pray that as we leave this place, you know our heart's desire. We wouldn't be here if we didn't want to be like Jesus. Help us to understand what it means to be transformed and how we can be changed and transformed. Help us to live with courage as countercultural in this world. Help us to have courage to be bold in our faith and our walk with you. To know that following Jesus is the only way to life, abundant life. The world has nothing. So go with us now as we leave this place. May we seek you with all of our heart, with all of our soul, mind, and strength. May we love you and love our neighbor as ourselves. In your name we pray. And all the people said, amen. Amen. Remember all the sign-up sheets in the lobby. Be sure and take note of those before you head out the door.